More scaling laws now.
So I think you've outlined four of them with pre-training, post-training, test time, and agentic scaling. What do you think when you think about the future, deep future and the near-term future? What are the blockers that you're most concerned about that keep you up at night that you have to overcome in order to keep scaling?
Well, we can go back and reflect on what people thought were blockers.
Mhm.
So in the beginning, we were the pre-training scaling law. People thought, rightfully so, that the amount of data that we have, high quality data that we have, will limit the intelligence that we achieve. And that scaling law was an important, very important scaling law. The larger the model, the correspondingly more data results in results in a smarter AI. And so that was pre-training. And Ilias said, we're out of data or something like that. Pre-training is over or something like that. The industry panicked, that this is the end of AI. And of course, that's obviously not true. We're going to keep on scaling the amount of data that we have to train with. A lot of that data is probably going to be synthetic. And that also confused people, and what people don't realize is that they've kind of forgotten that most of the data that we are training, that we teach each other with, inform each other with, this is synthetic. You know, I, it's synthetic because it didn't come out of nature. You created it. I'm consuming it. I modify it, augment it. I regenerate it. Somebody else consumes it. And so we've now reached a level where AI is able to take ground truth, augment it, enhance it, synthetically generate an enormous amount of data. And that part of post-training continues to scale. And so the amount of data that we could use that is human generated will be smaller and smaller and smaller. The amount of data that we use to train model is going to continue to scale to the point where we're no longer limited. Training is no longer limited by data, is now limited by compute. And the reason for that is most of the data is synthetic. Then the next phase is test time. And I still remember people telling me that inference, oh yeah, that's easy. Pre-training, that's hard. These are giant systems that people are talking about. Inference must be easy. And so inference chips are going to be little tiny chips, and they're not like NVIDIA's chips. Oh, those are going to be complicated and expensive, and we could make, and this is and in the future inference is going to be the biggest market, and it's going to be easy, and we're going to commoditize it, and everybody can build their own chips, and that was always illogical to me because inference is thinking. And I think thinking is hard. Thinking is way harder than reading. Pre-training is just memorization and generalization, and looking for patterns and relationships. You're reading versus thinking, reasoning, solving problems, taking unexplored experiences, new experiences, and breaking it down into decomposing it into solvable pieces that we then go off either through first principle reasoning or through previous examples, prior experiences, or just exploration and search and trying different things. And that whole process of test time scaling, inference is really about thinking. And it's about reasoning, it's about planning, it's about search, and so how could that possibly be compute light? And we were absolutely right about that, so test time scaling is intensely compute intensive. Then the question is, okay, now we're at inference and we're at test time scaling. What's beyond that? Well, obviously, we have now created, one agentic person. And that one agentic person has a large language model that we've now developed. But during test time, that agentic system goes off and does research and bangs on databases, and it goes on and uses tools. And one of the most important things it does is spins off and spawns off a whole bunch of sub-agents, which means we're now creating large teams. It's so much easier to scale NVIDIA by hiring more employees than it is to scale myself. And so the next scaling law is the agentic scaling law. It's kind of like multiplying AI. Multiplying AI, we could spin off agents as fast as you want to spin off agents. And so, you now have 4 scaling laws. And as we use the agentic systems, they're going to create a lot more data. They're going to create a lot of experiences. Some of it we're going to say, wow, this is really good. We ought to memorize this. That data set then comes all the way back to pre-training. We memorize and generalize it. We then refine it and fine-tune it back into post-training. Then we enhance it even more with test time, and the agents and agentic systems, put it out into the industry. And so this loop, this cycle is going to go on and on and on. It kind of comes down to basically intelligence is going to scale by one thing, and it's